Welcome to World at Work TV. I'm Allison Avalos, and I'm joined today by Juan Gonzalez of Axiom Consulting Partners and Bruce O'Neill of CSG International. And we're talking about annual salary reviews, quite the hot topic these days, gentlemen. I've heard you talk about, or question rather, the time it takes to invest in the whole process behind these reviews, creating them, negotiating them, all of the time associated with merit matrices and force rankings. Why are you two questioning it?
We're questioning these practices because they don't work. We've been in this field for a really long time. The issues have been the same. The amount of time it takes, the minimal increases that result, the minimum impact that results, and the frustration amongst managers, employees, and human resources practitioners. So if it's broken, we think we need to fix it.
So what do you think is wrong with the annual comp administration that most organizations follow today?
From a practice perspective, we spend a lot of time going through, getting managers ready, getting them prepared for very limited differentiation as it relates to the outcome from an incentive perspective. So when you think about time and improvement and process efficiencies and where could we better spend our time, spend our dollars, leveraging rewards, we think is there an opportunity to do it differently to further extend that differentiation as well as minimize the time and the constraints on managers going through these processes.
On the base salary side, it's even worse, right? So if you think of the time it takes to conduct the reviews, if you think of the limited budgets, and we've done the math on this, for an employee making $50,000, say your budget's 3%, so the meets expectations or a satisfactory employee is going to get 3%. A very high performer is going to get 1.5 times that, so 4.5%. The difference between the 4.5% and the 3% adjusted for taxes and divided by the number of pay periods is $22. Think of the amount of time that managers, employees, and human resources are putting into a process that yields a $22 difference to a high performer.
If it's so broken, how come it hasn't been addressed thus far?
My perspective on that is it is inertia. A lot of it is just it's a system that has been placed for a long time. A lot of practitioners have questioned the value of it, but it's the courage to go and look for alternatives, try to challenge the convention and do something different. And as part of that it's just a systematic approach, right? You've got an entire ingrained practice culture that has developed these, as well as people managers who are comfortable with it. And you're going to have to prepare them to do something different. And that takes a lot of time and energy, and the devil is better than the one that may or may not work.
There's also a challenge in that we have a real bias for benchmarking. So everyone does it this way. And the corollary to that is you're not going to find a lot of evidence about organizations who do it differently. So often when the conversation comes up, it goes something like this. Well, the process doesn't work. We need to change it. You come back with a new idea, an innovative approach, and immediately the next question is, well, who else is doing it? And if the answer is it's not a majority practice, things don't change. The majority practice is the one that's broken.
Talk about what achievement-based compensation is and the benefits that are associated with it.
So achievement-based compensation is an approach to paying people based on the nature of their achievements. So for an achievement like capability growth, which happens over time and at different paces, Bruce might learn something more quickly than I do, for example, we're going to start to pay people when they demonstrate that growth and when it's material. So instead of reviewing salaries annually, implementing a 3% merit increase for what might be a small amount of growth, instead, in achievement-based compensation, we're going to wait until we see that real movement and then really make it worth the employee's while. So instead of a 3% raise every year, it might be a 12 to 15% raise every 2 or 3 years, or really whenever that capability growth is demonstrated. Likewise, on the performance against objectives, we think that it's important to extend incentive participation so that all employees can avail themselves of significant incentives that matter, and if they're well-designed, incentives that self-fund.
So what does that mean for the administration process in thinking about the achievement-based compensation versus your traditional approach? Is it more labor-intensive, less labor-intensive? Are there other differences there?
It should actually be less labor-intensive because there's a different level of participation in the programs. If you think about it, if not everyone is receiving a salary increase, then there is a lower volume of salary increases to be processed in any given year. And for the people that are receiving salary increases, because they've demonstrated significant achievements, process is the same, it's just that the outcome is larger, right? There's a bigger raise.
Yeah, and the flip side to that is it does put a little bit more emphasis on the other reward systems to be working, right? So while the base pay adjustments might get locked into a different time cycle, the emphasis on your other reward structures need to be in a cadence that is commensurate with the business. So the idea is it's not following just a traditional annual cadence, you're aligning those reward structures to whatever the cadence of the business is. We're a software as a development company, so as software releases happen, production releases happen, you're aligning that reward system and that competency development or demonstration to that cycle on the incentive side. Now on the base pay side, that's a little different. So those two things have to work in concert, or otherwise you do get a very labor-intensive activity because you're asking managers to do lots of different things through it. So simplification is an important element to it as well.
And how about ownership of the process? Thinking the traditional versus the achievement-based, does it shift at all from your total rewards professional or central HR, if that's how you're set up, to line management somewhere in between?
So I'll give a perspective, which is it depends on your model from a business structure perspective. Like we try to get to a manager accountability model, right? So we want to put more onus on those managers to be more accountable for driving the decision. They're closest to the activity to be able to say what's working and not working and rewarding for that relative differentiation and that performance. So it does take a little bit of the administration that has been kind of the onus and the pride of ownership from the HR and rewards practitioner, and now putting it in the hands of the manager. So there is some training and growth and development that needs to happen even from practitioners' perspective to say, it's okay to let it go, just as long as we have what I call the guardrails to say, here are the parameters, work within it. But the accountability model for the managers are super important.
And at CSG, has there been any resistance from line managers, or do they welcome and embrace that change?
I think it's a combination, right? So I think you have some that are more on the progressive front because we've used words that resonate with our technical development folks, like agile performance management and the relationship to those short cycles. There's a contingent that says, yes, this makes sense to me, it resonates. And then there's others that don't quite get the connection and don't feel confident that the people managers are prepared and ready to take that big jump if we were to move all the way into something like that.
Any suggestions or key takeaways from that experience and trying to get them on board?
Train, continue to do that. Help understand the business reason as to the why part. It's a complete change and shift from very traditional models that have been ingrained over a long time, and trying to pare that back and move away from that takes a lot of time. And so I'd say, to use the big word, inculcate, you need to continue to work on that with the leadership team.
It's also the perfect time to do it if you're rethinking performance management. So as organizations move toward more continuous feedback, regular discussions, the agile performance management that Bruce is discussing, we're getting closer to conversations around what people are doing, how they're adding value, and it no longer makes sense to then turn around and say, but we're going to pay you in 12-month increments and use the old system. Compensation is ultimately about alignment. So if you change the process, you change the conversation with employees, and you don't change how you pay them, you will fall out of alignment, even if you have perfectly good compensation processes and systems today.
So any other advice for CHROs who are looking to improve their how they reward performance at their organizations?
Well, I think being willing to try something new is important. We've been in this field for a while, and the problems that are cited every year, the issues, the complaints that are valid, that we hear from managers, employees, executives, and even human resources, have been consistent for a very long time. So the system is broken, and the advice would be, if it's broken and you're in a senior leadership role, consider doing something different and consider doing something that nobody else is doing, if it's the right solution for you. So instead of having the first question be who else is doing it, really stop and think about what this could do for your organization. We heard someone speak recently about courage being doing something that you know is going to be hard. Achievement-based compensation is a new idea, and implementing it is probably going to be difficult for most organizations. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, and it certainly doesn't mean you shouldn't consider it.
but it might require a certain amount of courage to do.
I think so.
Thank you both. For World at Work TV, I'm Allison Avalos.